Just wanted to do a quick video on overhung versus underhung. I belong to a is it car stereo culture group on Facebook, and somebody, I don't know who, but they just post like old school ads from like the 90s and late 80s from car audio magazines, and so that's very nostalgic, and it's interesting. There's been a couple of issues that come up that I realize now are it's just marketing, but back then I was 16, 17. I didn't know any better. And but one of the ones that came up was PPI's flat piston subs, which, by the way, looked then fantastic. That flat, it was a honeycomb carbon fiber, or Nomex skinned carbon fiber, or I'm sorry, Nomex honeycomb wafer, which I believe was actually made here. There's a company in between Phoenix and Tucson that specializes in honeycomb, what's the word, panels. So, and then because those things are kind of tough, and I'm sure you could probably die cut them. They got to die cut them, and then they attach the surround to them, and they were custom screen printed and all that kind of stuff. So, but I forgot that there was a version. They made a rookie version, or like an in-between version than the Pro one, and both of them were underhung to be sound quality. But what was funny was there's no marketing power in underhung woofers. Tilo Stompler found that out. If you go back in the Internet Archives under the tcsounds.com, Tilo's all for underhung, and that's what he kept promoting, underhung design. So an underhung design means that you have a thick top plate, typically. Maybe I should get some light in here. My phone is betarded when it's not light out. So underhung design is a thick top plate, and then a voice coil that stays within that parameter. And so that you end up with, if you want some high excursion, you need like a 2-inch thick top plate. And you saw that in some designs, I think on the, who was it? I don't know. Crystal was one of them. Of course, Adair Brahma. And again, what's funny is those are all promoted as sound quality, but nobody uses them for that. Nobody uses it for sound quality, because what you realize is it's just like an amplifier. When using for sound quality, all you do is buy a really big amplifier, and then you use very little of it. That's it. You use like anywhere from 25 to 50% of the amp. That's it. That's what sound quality is. You can use any amplifier that way. So, and it's the dumbest thing. It's, again, what it really is just marketing. So it's to, I read this thing the other day about, what's his name? The guy, what was he called? The mayor or something like that? The guy that promoted for, the colonel that promoted for Elvis. So people that didn't like Elvis because Elvis was so popular, he actually sold them buttons that said, "I hate Elvis." So that way he could make money off of them as well. So, and that's really the scheme, I guess, or it's a very savvy marketing ploy to divide people. So that way you have fans, and then you have anti-fans. Or you remember that there's a Tom Slick cartoon where he's like, "Thanks, hate fans," all the people that hate him. Yeah, I'm showing my age there. I watched the only reason why I know that is because the Tom Slick episode of that came on when my brother was featured on Wallace and Ladmo, which is a local kids show here. But anyways, sorry, down the rabbit hole on that one. Underhung. So this is underhung, big thick top plate. Voice coil stays within the gap. So if you want really, if you want 2-inch excursion, you got to have a 2-inch top plate. And the steel is actually very expensive. It's not expensive by the ton, but when it's machined and prepared the way it is in a loudspeaker, it can be very expensive. And it's also very heavy. The other thing is overhung. So overhung is the other option. There is an in-between called even hung, but it's not really effective. It's not magic. And what's funny is I gotta all this stuff I just kind of stick in my brain, and then I couldn't ever do anything with it because I didn't really have an outlet at the time, and now I do. But this information actually came from Speaker Builder magazine. It's several years old. They said let's finally do a test and figure out what's better, underhung or overhung. Come to find out, there's no inherent advantages of either one. So underhung does not give you more linear excursion or is less distortion, any of that bullshit. It's the same. It doesn't care, and that actually speaks more to the electromechanical nature of the loudspeaker in the first place. It doesn't give a shit. And so typically most designs now are overhung, where you have, it can be a thick top plate as well. So, I don't know, whatever, because that's actually what TC Sounds is. And so what happened was Tilo realized that the overhung is a higher performing loudspeaker. And when I say higher performing, what I really mean is that it gives people what they want, which is just fucking abusive, powerful audio, right? Bass performance. And I think he was actually stuck with all those 3 HP top plates for his underhung designs. And then he finally gave in and was like, fuck it, let's just go with what people want. And then he used a longer coil for a thick top plate. And so the thick top plate is just for looks. That's all it really is. There is some, and I say some, there is some science, and you can look at it in some of the magnetic modeling software that's available out there, as far as saturation and how it performs in the gap and things like that. It looks ideal, but how it performs is really kind of bullshit. What it really acts as is a big heat sink, which is good. So that means it allows for more abuse, which is how most people use loudspeakers. They abuse the shit out of them. So, but the overhung design actually won mostly because the coil was larger than the underhung design. And this is in the Speaker Builder magazine test report or whatever the article that they wrote. And these are, top guys, leading, I don't want to call them scientists because not all of them are scientists, but they're very learned, and they've been doing this for, twice as long as I have. And so this is their report. And which in my experience, this equals that. I've been observing this, but it's great to always get that technical confirmation of your observations, right? So it sort of just makes that click, so that you can feel more confident in your design decisions. So, but the overhung design actually handles more power because the coil is physically larger, and a physically larger coil provides better power handling, not necessarily better performance. That has to deal with the number of windings in the gap, right? BL, which is magnetic times the length of wire, which is the number. It ends up being the number of turns, but it's just represented as L as in length of wire. So, but you really, what you want is a maximum amount of turns in there, and just a big, nice chunk of metal. And again, it goes back to things I've talked about, which is there are benefits to using aluminum, and then there are also benefits to using copper. And sometimes there's a downside to either one of them. There's always a compromise. And just so you know, there's no advantage for having. They make CCAW, which is copper-clad aluminum wire. That's a bullshit thing too, because as soon as you scrape off the copper, then it's just aluminum wire. So I don't know why they marketing. Oh, and the other thing that doesn't matter is coil color. There are no magic adhesives or treatments to coils that make them handle power better. It just isn't. Once you get about 500F on temperature, everything just starts to melt down, including the adhesives that hold these magnets and the top plate together. That's the only thing that really holds these together. There are some designs that use bolts. They use hardware through here, all the way from the top plate to the T-yoke. However, that's mostly to prevent shifting. And it does make it last longer, but again, you have to weigh the benefits of cost. Cost performance analysis. If I could build this into every one of them, sure, I would do that. Yeah. but it's a lot of pain in the butt and a lot of lining up and some other stuff. So sometimes it's just not worth it, and I'd rather just build it and go, which is what I've been doing. And then typically I do an overhung design because that's what people want. So I have done underhung designs, but typically those have been XBL. And if you want to get real quick into XBL, I didn't really get into, let's see. I talked a little bit about XBL. XBL is an underhung technology where it uses two gaps, and it actually is more effective if you use a long coil in the XBL gap. So it ends up with two humps in BL performance. It doesn't quite act as flat as you see in some of the graphs. And you also got to remember on some of those graphs that you saw, that you see for XBL or anything underhung, you have to look at the gauge that it has. So typically it's a gauge like this, and then it has like 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter, and so the excursion is not that great, and so they're like, oh, it's linear from here to here, and you're like, well, yeah, but that's only 3 millimeter each way, so it's not 30 millimeter. That would be something impressive, and that's actually what happens with LMS. So LMS is Thilo's design. He got turned down for a patent. They said they couldn't patent just windings. And so what he did was he did more windings here and then more windings there and then a thin top plate. And so that way when it reaches the end of its excursion, it has a little more boost. And so that actually did work. And he would get anywhere from 3.5 to 4 inches of linear excursion. And you're talking about 70% BL, that kind of, that's really wonderful. However, both of these sacrifice huge amounts of BL by making them, by achieving this flat, it ends up looking like that, or it ends up looking like this. Not really square, but you get the idea as far as your BL curve. But it really sacrifices huge amounts. Now, what is good, and I actually found out that, who is it? Somebody, I forget the name. It's a new company and they use LMS, but they don't call it LMS. They call it something else. And I don't know, whatever. It's a gimmick. So it's a gimmick. Does it work? Yes, but only when you have excessive amounts of BL, like a really saturated Neo motor. And so it's really effective for mids and tweeters. That's what it's really good for. So, and you can do a lighter version of LMS with like aluminum wire and a smaller voice coil and things like that, and it might be effective. I would have to see it, but again, can you hear the difference? That's what really counts. Because if you can't hear the difference, and the only person in the room that can hear the difference is the computer, right? And that's because you're looking at a fucking graph. That doesn't count. Then you're talking about, it's like measuring a distortion ratio between 0.05 and 0.005. Oh, you can hear the difference. No, you can't. Fucking most humans can't even hear 9% distortion, right? You don't start detecting distortion until you hit about 10%, even 15% for some people, because some people are stupid. No, that's a joke. Some people are just very abusive. That's all. So, Patrick, you're isolating your audience. That's okay. Nobody likes me anyway, so that's fine. I could just tell my fucking thoughts and then deal with the consequences later, which is actually always better. So, because then you find out who your friends are. But so XBL is the underhung technology pioneered and patented by Dan Wiggins, which I've used. Again, it also works even better with an overhung coil and the dual gap, which is what that what's it called? Unique. And they the stupid Parts Express woofer, that's a 5-inch woofer and a 7-inch woofer that I just critiqued. Whatever, there's stupid little woofers. Those are gimmicks too, and they're meant to, again, you're like, oh, but they look at the performance, and you're like, yeah, you need 10 of those to do the job of one woofer, and they're like, well, 10 times $100, that's $1,000. What could you have spent $1,000 on? Oh, I don't know, maybe a couple Robot Underground woofers and a sex slave. Like, fucking use your money correctly, Jesus Christ. And then LMS, God, I can't remember the name of that company. They spell their name weird. But they just use an LMS coil, which is a variable wind coil. Again, gimmick, also gimmick as far as if you're marketing on these platforms. So as you saw with unique. I keep wanting to call it unique. Epic. That's what it's called. Epic. But they spell it weird as well. The Epic drivers from Parts Express. They actually do not mention XBL because that is a patented technology and it's also copyrighted. And so in order to say those words, you have to pay a royalty to Dan, which they probably did not, which is fucked up. You should pay Dan because Dan only charges like $1 a unit. It's fucking great. It's very affordable. But that's basically what I wanted to talk to you about, overhung versus underhung. And going back to the PPI woofers, they made a mid-level one that used a stamp frame, much smaller magnet. I think it was only a single slug magnet, and then the flat piston with a foam surround. And then the Pro Series used a rubber surround, probably a thicker, like maybe a 2-layer wafer, or maybe made out of some other material. They used a cast frame and then a double stack magnet. And that both production versions were. I don't want to overspeak because I don't quite remember. I think the medium version with the stamp frame would probably, because the magnet was so thin, it was probably an overhung design. So, but the magnet is so small, it was don't you want to listen to a flat piston? And that the whole thing of bullshit about you don't want to oval because sound waves aren't oval, and so round speakers are better. They used to have that argument about 6x9s versus, or not 6x9s, but 5x7s versus 5.25s. That 5.25s sound better because they're round. That's all bullshit. So, and then when you stick it in your car, all the waves hit everything else anyway. It doesn't fucking matter. What you really care about is sensitivity and performance. So, and that's, kicker woofers. L7 doesn't make square waves. It makes round waves. So it's just a square fucking woofer. But as far as the PPI goes, because again, my guess is that to give a little more performance edge too, with such a small motor, they probably made the in-between series, because I don't think there was a lower series. There was just like a junior series, like Rockford, like a punch series, which was like pretty good. And then there was the Pro series, which was like the one that they advertised with Alumigates. Now, here's the kicker. So Alumigates woofers, which I think it was like 7210s or something like that. It was a bunch of 10-inch woofers. Those were highly modified. Those were all overhung. They were not production models used by PPI. And this was again a marketing gimmick that PPI seemed to be okay with. So, but all of the guys that I talked to that used to work for the company that helped build Alumigates, fucking, the original monster it was like 2-inch thick aluminum baffle. Those were highly modified overhung woofers to just take tons of abuse. And they felt okay with that. That's basically a big lie. And then what was weird was because the whole thing was marketed as a sound quality, but then, they make a 15-inch version, and those were really expensive woofers too. They made a lot of money off of that shit. And that nobody used them for that. They were like, wow, these sound great. And they just use them like regular fucking woofers. So again, a lot of the stuff is just marketing. It's to take advantage of your naivete, your what's the word? Your insecurities, right? So because nobody wants to be left out. Nobody wants to be the lone guy standing. Because you're vulnerable, right? People love herd immunity, even if it's from criticism. So, but really, the truth is what I'm after, and that's what. And I've learned long ago when I even was building woofers, and I tried to make friends with shops. They're abusive fucking people, and they will destroy anybody in their path, and because they think that's the path to success. But so. It's like the Sprint fucking manager that was a piece of shit to me, where his sales guys had force fed sales to me. I forget what it's called. Slamming, I think, is the term for those types of sales where they give it to you whether you like it or not. So I asked the guy, I go, dude, how did you make manager? And he goes, well, everybody just quit. So that's one way to make manager, right? And what you got to really understand is that being manager is not a successful position. Being an owner is, and there are many owners that I've met that are in that position of success simply because everybody quit or everybody got frustrated or everybody went broke. And this was the last guy standing. So just because somebody is rich does not make them right. And just because somebody is in a position of power does not make them good. So always use critical thinking when looking at science or science claims and things like that. The other claim that I saw on the old school one was the old Punch HD. When Rockford Fosgate came out with the Punch HD, this is probably 90, like probably 89, because the Rockford Punch series was really super successful, and they came out with HD, which was supposed to be like, heavy duty. In their case, they used it as hybrid, so which is kind of weird because whatever. Hybrid is just the first and last initials, so whatever. Anyways, hybrid. So, hybrid design. That's what it was. It's an acronym for hybrid design. So the only thing hybrid about it was, let me get a new chalkboard here. So was really the revolution of DSM. So so there's a couple things. Okay, DSM, right, which is what they called their, God damn it, there we go. Discrete surface mount. That's what DSM is. So discrete surface mount is just, instead of a big resistor that looks like this, something like that, that's a through hole resistor. It's this little tiny little, like that. It takes up a lot less board space than this big resistor. So even though they're the same value, let's say it's a 1K resistor. So the other thing about DSM is that it's placed on the board with a robot. And this robot is fucking quick, man. It's all boom, 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 boom. And they even have through-hole robots, which they also used on the line at Rockford Fosgate. So the only thing that the hybrid design was that they would have these little daughter cards that would come off the board like that, and they would just plug in, and then they would run it through the wave solder machine, which is just a solder bath that goes on the bottom of the board, and that was it. And this card was DSM, meaning it was discrete surface mount, and actually, I think if you ran it through the oven, you probably had to go in there and hand solder that. Now that I think about that, I don't know. I would love to hear somebody else talk about the DSM cards. It was just a vertical upright on the PC board. That's it. That's the only difference. It doesn't make it better. There's no performance difference between through hole and surface mount. None. Zero. It's the same fucking device. And it doesn't matter if it's an inductor, a capacitor, or even a SMT, which is a surface mount transistor. Same fucking thing. What DSM does, or discrete surface mount or surface mount technology, does is it makes the board smaller. That's it. And it's also automated. So the reason why Rockford employed it was because it would allow them to cut staff. Their production line used to be like 50 dudes, and maybe some women. But and the other thing is you can pay women less money. So that's why you want more women on the team. So when I became a Rockford employee back in 1999, the production floor was, I think, 4 Mexican ladies, chubby Mexican ladies that spoke very little English, and then one meth mouth, that little skinny guy with just no teeth and drank lots of Mountain Dew. He was just putting the transformers on the boards before they would go through the solder bath after they came out of the DSM robot. So that's it. That's the only thing. And Rockford probably was the first one to do that in car audio. Good for them. But as far as electronics, no, they weren't the first. But that's what's great about Phoenix, is that because ASU has several technical schools here, or did at the time, there's always a good what do they call it? Well of knowledge, which is really just cheap guys, cheap techs, cheap electrical engineering students that are, in their 20s and raring to go and will work for cheap. And that's what Rockford needs, is cheap labor and cheap brains. And so that was some of the solutions they came up with. And that's the reason why they came up with HD. It wasn't to make the amplifier better, it was to make production costs cheaper. So always remember that you got to think about the intentions of these companies, right? These intentions are never to help you. That's not why they're there. They're there to soak as much fucking money out of you as possible. And at the peak of PPI's engineering prowess, they had over 40 engineers on staff. Dude, you're talking about these guys made like $75,000 at the time, and this is in the 90s. So those are really good fucking job. So they were making better money than like drug cartels. Like they were making a lot of money. And they're paying all these guys really good money, and that's not including the rest of the staff. You're talking about easily 200, 300 employees. Like this is a really expensive operation. So, and even then, those engineers, those designers would have arguments over what's better, low voltage or like high current or high voltage, or low voltage and low current. Like what's the better way to send a signal? And they would still fight over stuff. And in the end, did it really matter? No. What mattered was if the design worked. And the one that got approved was the one that cost less. So somebody's got to pay for all those engineering degrees, and somebody's got to pay for all that labor. And the way that it comes out is the owner still wants to make a healthy fucking profit because he's, making better money than Pablo Escobar. And it's all legit. That's the other thing. Back in the 90s, I mean, it was people were just buying car audio and paying $1 a watt and didn't give a shit. I don't know where the money was coming from. Probably from cocaine. So, yeah, I'm in here, babe. So Sherry's home with dinner, but I'm going to take off. But that was the other thing is look out for marketing. DSM is just whatever. It doesn't matter. It's potato. And then as far as, overhung versus underhung, again, potato. What you want to look at is the final thing, performance. How does this sound? Do you like it? And the best one to measure value is it affordable? So are you getting value for your dollar? But I love you guys. Happy Labor Day. I will talk to you later this week. I just been building a lot. And in fact, I'll be up all night building. I got up real early and I ended up having to crash and take a nap. So, but I love you. I'll talk to you later.